Most of us grew up with this really simple, logical idea. India's got the talent. We've got the engineers. So it's only a matter of time before we dominate electronics and manufacturing. It makes sense, right? But here's the thing. That belief, while it sounds good, is dangerously incomplete. So what is really going on? Why does this logical idea seem to fall apart when it hits reality? Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's the central paradox, the big puzzle. You've got global giants, think Intel, think Qualcomm, with these huge R&D centers right here in India, literally designing the future. We have one of the biggest pools of engineers on the planet. And yet, when you look at the actual physical stuff, the chips, the displays, the guts of our electronics, we're massive importers. This is the core question we're going to tackle today. Where is the disconnect between our amazing design brains and our manufacturing muscle?
And this brings us to the most important point of this entire explainer, the bottleneck. The real problem, it isn't a lack of smarts or ambition from our founders and engineers. No way. The real issue is systemic. It's about the very structure of our industrial ecosystem, our financial systems, and even our history. The system is working exactly the way it's been shaped to work, and understanding that system is the absolute first step to figuring out how to navigate it.
We hear it all the time, right? Oh, China just did it better. But honestly, that's way too simple. China didn't just build a bunch of factories. It built these incredibly dense, interconnected ecosystems. In the hardware world, proximity is literally everything. When your suppliers, your tool makers, your testing labs are all just a few kilometers away, you can learn, fail, and iterate at lightning speed. In India, well, we face a very different reality.
So picture this. A founder's journey in India often looks something like this. You're designing your brilliant new product in Bangalore. Then you have to get a prototype made, maybe in Pune. But then you realize you need critical components that you can only get from China. What about the molds for your plastic casing? Yeah, those have to be tooled in Taiwan. And then finally, all of this stuff gets shipped to Chennai for assembly. This isn't just a logistics headache. Every single one of those steps, every kilometer of that distance is a leak. You're leaking knowledge, you're leaking speed, and maybe most importantly, you are leaking control over your own product.
And this isn't some new problem. Let's rewind. Back in 1984, India was actually a pioneer with something called the Semiconductor Complex Limited, or SCL. We were ahead of the game. But in 1989, a fire gutted the facility. Now, the real tragedy wasn't the fire itself. It was what happened next. What followed was almost a decade of bureaucratic paralysis. While SCL was just sitting there, idle, countries like Taiwan and South Korea, fueled by aggressive government support, just blew past us. That lost decade cost us dearly, putting us years, maybe even a full generation behind the curve.
Okay, so let's zoom in from that huge macro ecosystem problem right down to the factory floor, to the mindset that's required to make things at scale. There's this fundamental truth that so many ecosystems focused on software just don't get. Making a single working prototype means almost nothing. The real challenge, the true discipline of manufacturing, starts when you try to make 10,000 of them, all perfectly.
Now, what's so fascinating about this is how it shows two completely different ways of thinking. Prototyping, it's all about being clever, about improvising, what we in India love to call jugaad. But here's the hard truth. In mass production, jugaad is a liability. Manufacturing demands brutal, boring consistency and process control. You can't just jugaad your way around tiny tolerances. You can't give a motivational speech to get a higher yield. The laws of physics just do not care how passionate your pitch deck is. And this, right here, is where so many promising hardware startups quietly fall apart. Let me give you a really tangible example. Take a look at this number, 1 million. That's the number of production cycles, or shots, you can expect from a typical high-precision injection mold that's made in China. This is the tool that makes, say, the plastic case for your product. Its quality, its lifespan, that determines your entire unit economics. So how does the Indian version stack up?
Now look at this, 100,000. That's the typical lifespan of a similar mold made in India, usually with lower-grade tool steel. We're talking about a 10 times difference. That means an Indian manufacturer has to pay for that expensive tooling 10 times more often, or they just have to accept lower quality parts. And just like that, a hidden gap in materials science has completely nuked your unit economics before you've even started. So beyond the factory itself, there's another giant hurdle, money. India's startup and VC ecosystem has been an incredible success story, but let's be honest, it's been optimized for one thing and one thing only, software. And this creates a really tough, almost hostile financial environment for anybody trying to build a business with atoms instead of just bits. You see, hardware and software might as well be from different economic planets.
Software has super low upfront costs, you can change things in days, and it scales almost for free. Hardware, it's the complete opposite. It's incredibly heavy on capital. You need machines, tools, inventory. Iteration takes months, not days, and your cash can be tied up for 120, even 150 days. So when VCs try to judge a hardware company using software metrics, it's a total recipe for disaster.
And this is what forces hardware founders into what everyone calls the valley of death. They can usually get some seed funding to build a cool prototype, and yeah, once they have a ton of revenue, Series A investors might show up. But what about that huge gap in between? That critical phase where you need, say, $500,000 to $2 million for things like tooling and certifications in your first pilot production run. That capital is almost impossible to find. That gap is the valley of death, and it's where so many promising hardware companies in India go to die.
Okay, now let's talk about the people. We always hear about India's demographic dividend, all these young people. But in manufacturing, there's a serious skills mismatch. And the biggest labor shortage isn't at the very top with the PhD engineers, it's in that critical, skilled execution layer right on the factory floor.
This right here might be the most shocking statistic of all. You see multiple reports that suggest up to 80% of India's engineering graduates are pretty much unemployable in core engineering roles. Why? Well, it's because the curriculum is often way too theoretical, totally outdated. They can explain thermodynamics from a textbook, but they can't troubleshoot a real-world heat exchanger. They might know some code, but not the PLC programming that actually runs the automated machines in a modern factory.
So here's the real deal. A successful factory isn't built by founders alone. Not even close. It's built on the backs of skilled technicians, master toolmakers, and experienced shop floor supervisors. This missing middle is the true engine of quality and efficiency. But in India, these jobs often don't have the prestige or clear career paths, and that prevents our factories from ever really growing up and maturing.
Okay, so now we've got to talk about the brutal math of it all. These are the uncomfortable truths that founders absolutely must face if they want to survive, let alone succeed. This isn't about being negative, it's about being a realist.
Let's just be brutally honest for a second. You simply cannot beat the established global supply chains on price when it comes to commoditized electronics. It's just not possible. Passion and national pride are amazing motivators, but they don't change the numbers on a bill of materials. Some hardware startups, and this is tough to say, frankly shouldn't exist. Not because the founders aren't smart, but because the math is just absolutely unforgiving.
And here it is. This is the number that explains so much of that brutal math. India has an 80% import dependency for electronic components. This one number shows you the giant hollow middle of our supply chain. It means that for a lot of products that say made in India, the most valuable parts are actually made somewhere else. It also exposes our manufacturers to huge currency risks and supply chain shocks.
So, after all of that, is it just hopeless? No, absolutely not. But it does mean you can't fight reality. You have to design your business around it. So what's the playbook? Let's talk about a strategic, realistic way forward for the founders who still want to build.
All right, here are the new rules of the game if you want to survive and even thrive. First, stop trying to fight on price. You'll lose. Compete on value, on service, on your unique IP. Second, think about B2B markets, industrial stuff, medical devices, places where customers care more about reliability than a rock-bottom price. Third, focus on high-mix, low-volume products that the giant factories just ignore. Fourth, master design for manufacturing early on. I promise you, this will save you from ridiculously expensive mistakes later. And critically, solve your working capital problem before you buy a single machine. Sometimes, the smartest play isn't building your own brand, but becoming a super high-quality Tier 2 supplier to the big guys.
At the end of the day, all of this really boils down to one fundamental shift in mindset. Manufacturing isn't just the last step on a project plan after you've done all the important design work. It is a deep, complex, and incredibly difficult discipline all on its own. It demands respect, it demands expertise, and it demands constant learning.
So what's the real takeaway here? The story of Indian hardware isn't really one of failure. It's one of immense challenge. The founders who are going to succeed in this environment, they're not going to be the ones with the flashiest presentations or the loudest dreams. They're going to be the quiet realists, the ones who see the system for exactly what it is, who understand its constraints, and then methodically, intelligently build within them. And that is how real, sustainable industries are actually built.